from AOTR and OSTNL. We have Joyce Burt from Grandview and Dayton, and she's a trauma data analyst. And then we also have Marianne Edwards from Hillcrest Hospital in Cleveland, trauma program manager. So we're going to start out going through how to build your TQIP cohorts in trauma base, and then Marianne will cover DI after the trauma base section. Please make sure you're muted. You can unmute to ask questions, use the hand raise, or use the chat. We'll be monitoring all of them. And if nobody has any questions before we start, I'll go ahead and let Joyce begin her presentation.
And Carly, I just lost my screen. I apologize.
We have a hospital in Lima that does the same shit as Columbus. You know, a lot of these people are low income.
Yeah. Make sure you're muted.
They could just go to Lima. We'll transfer them to Lima.
Joyce, are you okay? We'll give Joyce just a second. I think she might be having some technical difficulties. Joyce got bumped off, so she's getting back in, and then we'll get started. Sorry about that. All right, well, while we're still waiting on Joyce, does anybody have any follow-up questions or any experiences that or tips that they found while using their reports on some of our past sessions?
This is Bernie from Fairview. I was playing around with the TQIP reports and did find that there was an issue that I thought maybe it was just that I didn't understand it. So I had emailed TQIP asking if they could just help clarify. Apparently there was an issue with how it was being presented on their side, so they were in the process of fixing it. So I don't know for sure if it was just on our report or on everybody's. So more to come.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can find on those reports.
Mm-hmm.
What section was it on your report that wasn't right?
It came out, I believe it was on the
Carly, I'm in.
deaths.
Great. Thanks, Joyce.
Good. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
Okay, and I lost Citrix something, and I did see where some of our network people were having trouble with that. So of course it happened just as I was getting ready to start, but so I apologize. But are you ready for me?
Yeah, Bernie, did you want to finish real quick? I'm sorry. And then.
Oh, sorry.
It was on the death reports. It came out on a survey, and I was playing around and doing some further drill downs. If I can find the information, I'll definitely let you guys know. So we'll let them start their presentation. Sorry.
Great. Thank you. All right, Joyce, you are up.
Okay. Okay. So I think Carly already said, but I'm gonna show you how I build TQIP cohorts in TraumaBase. So first of all, when I was starting to think about how I would do this, I realized I was going to have to go to the TQIP, their website, and find out what they wanted for these cohorts, what was involved in the metrics. So we're going to talk about starting with the TQIP metrics using the TQP participant hub, data platform, and the platform library, and then we'll build one of the TQIP cohorts for severe TBI. So just briefly, I know you guys have seen this already, but what I do is I go to that library that has all our reports, and I find the most current information because I want my metrics to be from the most current information that TQIP has to provide. Now, in this case, unfortunately, it's fall 2020. We don't have anything for spring. We haven't submitted any of that data. I will tell you this, though, as long as I've been doing this, I haven't noticed that the metrics have changed. And so I feel confident if I wanted to use this on my 2021 data, I could start using it. And then when I get my spring report, I always review it again to make sure if anything has changed, that I change my metrics in my actual, in my TraumaBase, what they call TraumaBase association flag. But in this case, I've not seen changes. So I'm going to use the fall 2020 report. Remember, some of my metrics and inclusions are going to be different because I'm a level 3, but you can find these documents and you'll see what your facility metrics and definitions are. Keeping in mind that if I'm looking at 2020 data, I'm going to have to use 2020 dictionary if I need it, if I'm going to need to use it. So when I click on that fall report, I'm going to see these documents. You're going to see a resources folder, which provides the inclusion cohort definitions within that folder. You see your benchmark reports. You see another file called README. Now, I will admit, the first few times I looked at our facility's TQIP data, I really didn't pay attention to that document, even though it says README. I just kind of didn't pay attention. But I opened it up one time and I realized it's actually kind of the key to all the documents that they provide in this resource folder. So I just screenshotted a little blurb about what the reporting code said, how it's described to us, how they use it. So they tell you here that the purpose of this document is to list all AIS and ICD codes that help to define a metric in TQIP benchmark reports. So that's important. I need to know what those codes are. It also drives that data quality report that we get. So, for instance, if you're getting a data quality error report and you think that your data isn't beyond that 10% of error, then you might want to look at these reporting code sets to make sure that whatever you're your registry staff is coding for certain things, that it meets what TQIP is looking for. So just a little, I'd look at that report or that document. So we click on that resources folder and we see that we have aggregate reports. We have a reference document, which to me is all good information for building cohorts and inclusion. You see your benchmark reports and you see that reporting code set, which is a Excel spreadsheet. And again, I just put on the bottom what that reporting code set, how it's defined and used per the key that I found on README document. So let's see here. So I go into the reference document, and according to the table of contents, I have a lot of good information in here. I see that they're going to give me, or they are giving me, my report inclusion exclusions and the cohort definitions, which are what I'm looking for as a data analyst at my facility. Now, my manager probably wants to see a lot of these other things, but for me, if I'm building cohorts, I'm going to use those that part of the document. So I first go to the metrics for the TQIP included patients. So, you know, you send your data, you have this NTDS data file that gets sent to TQIP, and within that file, they pull out all the TQIP, the data that they want based on their metrics for inclusion. So you've got your big file, then they narrow it down to this smaller TQIP file. So these are the metrics and definitions for what's included in just your TQIP data. So, you know, you might send 300, 400 patients for a quarter, but by the time the data gets through this TQIP inclusion, it's going to narrow it down quite a bit if you look at this inclusion criteria. So then I go into, I'm going to narrow down, go into my cohort definitions and see how are they defining these cohorts. So of course I said we're going to do severe TBI. It's quite complicated, but if you just take it one step at a time, you can do it. But I also noticed in the reporting definitions, we have a cohort definition. Now this isn't an inclusion entirely, but it's telling me there's a definition. So now I have my NTDS data, I have my TQIP data, now I've got this cohort definition. And it tells me that it excludes isolated hip fractures in the elderly as well as early transfers, unless otherwise noted, because you see I have, being a level 3, I have that early transfer cohort, but I also have the isolated hip fracture. So I know with severe TBI, it's not otherwise noted. So I'm going to have to make sure when I do my severe TBI that I exclude isolated hip fractures, which if they've got a head injury, that's going to exclude them anyway, but just knowing that, and early transfers. Again, just so you can see it a little bit better, I made sure I use those cohort definitions as well as my cohort definitions based on what they exclude, and then the actual cohort definition for severe TBI. So now I go into trauma base, and trauma base allows you to customize, and you can build these associations or symbolic fields. If you're a trauma base user, they're under your codes menu, associations, and what I try to do is make sure in my description, since this is just a free text for me to use as a guide, I identify, you know, I'm using severe TBI definition from the 2020 fall report for my level 3, just so I might forget what did I use, you know, and then when I go back to 2021, or when we finally get 2021, I will modify it if I need to. The type of field that I'm going to create is a true-false flag, meaning that it's either true that the patient meets all these criteria, or it's false. 1 meaning yes, the answer 1 meaning yes, that it's true, the answer 0 meaning no, that it's not true. I named the flag a new field name, flag TQIP TBI, and that means something to me because now I know it's a TQIP definition that I'm using for TBI. Something else I would like to stress is that you should always test these associations or fields that you create as a user to make sure that you're getting the data that you want, that they are working as you've set them up. So now I'm going to add the metrics to my association, which is a true false in trauma base. I'm using, of course, a severe TBI. Just so you know, I use other TQIP cohort flags within that I've already created. So you can see I've got flag TQIP include. So I created a flag prior to creating this flag in trauma base that identified all my TQIP patients. I also created a flag for that TQIP isolated hip fracture in the elderly and the early transfers out. So knowing that I've already had those flags or associations created, I can use them in this. So now I'm taking something I've already created and plugging it into this particular association to find my patients. So if you look at your definition for severe TBI, we want to make sure we have head injuries that are only between 3 and 6. Okay, so, and then there's that little caveat there that says excluding TBI, AIS 0508 that are listed on the TQIP reporting code set. Well, there's that reporting code set. So I realized I'm going to have to look at that reporting code set to see what all that is explaining to me. But we'll go to that on the next slide. So now I've said I want only AIS head injuries between 3 and 6. I want my GCS. That's my first GCS in my facility, either ED or hospital. That's between 3 and 8. So that little icon under the comparable value in that column, the dash, if you hit an F2 in trauma base, it'll explain to you that that means you can use that for between, meaning numbers between or data between 3 and 6. And then I know that I want only motor, GCS motor in my first GCS motor in the ED or hospital. It has to be between 1 and 4. And I also know that I need that GCS assessment qualifier or paralytics in my database that equal sedated or paralyzed. So my data elements are what's over on the right-hand column, S, SI, SO, SIO. So now I'm saying I want only those that had a paralytic or were sedated. And then I used this other flag that I'll explain to you in slide 3, because what I had to do was, because I'm trying to pull data from a multi-value field, AIS, and I'm trying to eliminate some data, okay? Because it's multi-value in isolation, eliminate the data in isolation. I had to find something that CDM had already created for us, and I modified it. So I'll explain that here in just a second, but let's go to the next slide, because I'm going to explain this little blurb here about AIS between 3 and 6, and then that little excluding isolated TBI, AIS, from the TQIP reporting code set. So let's go to that reporting code set. So this is that document that's in that resources folder. And it's a big document, Excel spreadsheet. And what it does is it tells you what they consider for each metric. In this case, TBI, and I don't know if it's easy to read, but it's telling me that they don't want any injuries in isolation that are coded in these AIS injury codes to the left, because they don't qualify for severe TBI, okay? Now, something to note is the first 2 injuries are scalp avulsions with some blood loss and total loss of skin. I didn't give you the whole column, what it said, but in essence, what it's telling you is these should be coded to external, because I know that they're under the head injury section, but because they're external, and I think they just put that in because probably there's registry that might think that should be part of the head instead of external, but it is external for TQIP. And then you'll see that they don't include in isolation internal carotid artery or skull fractures. So I just added that little bottom. I could see that better. I could see those codes better there. So what I had to do was make sure that those codes were not included in my TBI for TQIP in isolation. So let's go to the next slide and I'll show you what I meant about. I went to the data dictionary. If you hit the F5 in trauma base, you can query the data dictionary. The patient dictionary in trauma base. It's just a command that's dict space patient. And it brings you to this middle view. And you can drop down your column here, the second white box, and you can search for something that might be close to what you want to use. And in this case, I happened to find that CDM had provided us with a field flag that was flag AIS head _ SUP. And what that was is that they suppressed some codes. And you can see in the middle of the formula, because I can't do these on my own. I mean, this is not something that I know how to do, but I can certainly copy and paste them. So I noticed in the formula, what codes they were suppressing didn't include those carotid artery or the skull fractures. So all I did was copied it and pasted it into a new name field that's flag AIS head TQIP, and I added those to my formula. So now, after I tested it, it worked. So I felt confident that now I'm getting all the TQIP, TBI injuries based on their definition, including making sure these in isolation are not included in that group, okay? So I added then this flag AIS head TQIP to my report, my true false flag. And I tested it and I felt confident that it does work. So now that I have my cohort association created, I can now use it in a report. And what I did was I went to a trauma-based detailed report and I named it the Cohort Severe TBI, TQIP, for TQIP. And in my advanced tab, I know now my flag TQIP TBI, based on all these metrics, is going to give me what TQIP told me is severe TBI here, okay? So I ran my report and I get my patient. I've just shown you one patient that was in the list. That meets all of those metrics. And so now I can run this report for my manager for PI, monthly, weekly, whatever your time period is, or just before you send your TQIP report, your TQIP data up to TQIP, then that way you know what's going to hit your severe TBI. So that's really all I have. Are there any questions?
I know that was a ton of information for all the trauma-based users, but if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate. And if you need follow-up, or if you want to play with this and then email me, we can do that too. We are recording this and we'll post it like we have all the other sessions as well.
I do have one question. Is there, because you were talking about the README report, is there any way you could go back to that screen and show what your actual README report looks like?
Oh, okay, wait, you know what? It's on the website, on our TQIP website. Let me get back to, okay. So it's just a text document. It's in the library. Once you click on your report, like I clicked on Fall 2020 report, these are the files that are available to you. So again, like I said, I use the resources a lot because that's where all the metrics and definitions are. But I saw that README report and I opened it up and I thought, wow, that example, I can't show you the whole report. I have to get out and go back into TQIP, the platform, and dig around in there and get it for you. But this was just a screenshot, a little snapshot of how they explained what the reporting code set is. Now, the reporting code set is in this resource folder. See, right here. So when you click on the README, it'll tell you what all the documents are used for, what the metrics are used for. But most of those are going to be okay.
I can, if you give me just a second, I can show you this README report.
Okay, because I know when I was pulling mine up while you were discussing that, and I'm like, okay, mine's not really giving me any information. So
it looks ugly. It's a text report. I don't know why they did it as a text document. It looks kind of ugly. I actually just copied that into a Word document so it looked better. It was easier to show you. So I don't know if putting it in a Word the whole thing in a Word document might look more user friendly, but the text document isn't very user. I'm with you. It looks jumbly. Like, what is all this?
Are you guys able to see what I'm sharing, the README?
Yes, thank you. That helped me tremendously. I appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. Okay.
And honestly, when I saw that it was a text document, I just kind of, the first time I saw it, I thought, oh, I don't know what that is. That, didn't look important, which I shouldn't have thought that way, but I did. But then when I did open it, I started to dig through it and realized it was valuable.
All right, well, I'm going to switch over to Mary Ann's slides here.
Oh, do I have to stop sharing, Chloe?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, wait a minute. Oh, you know what? Can you see my slides? Because I'm not, it looks like I'm not even in the. Here, I'll end it first of all. Okay.
Mary Ann, are you on and can see your slides?
Good morning, Carly. Yes, I'm on and I can see the slides.
Great, thank you. And just tell me when you're ready for me to move on, and I'll go.
Sure, I'm ready to go. You can switch to the next one. So working with CV5 Trauma, which is also known as Digital Innovations and now ESO, I'm not going to go through the cohorts definitions. Basically building a report. I will show you at the end that in Digital Innovations, they have created quite a few of the cohort definitions already as queries. So basically when building a report, you have to create a name and give it a description. And then you have to decide what data elements from the registry you want to include in that report. So this is the severe TBI report that I created. And these are the data elements that I'm pulling out. Next slide. So when building a query for your TQIP cohort, again, you have to create a name and give it a description. If you notice that I gave the report name, called it severe TBI, and I also gave the query the same name. So it's very easy for me to match them up when I'm trying to run a report. The definitions I pulled in for here because I look at all severe TBIs and not just certain other aspects of it. So I went ahead and still pulled the ED GCS of less than or equal to 8. And then I pulled all the diagnoses for AIS that's attributed to traumatic brain injury or severe TBI. The reason it's blank down there in that little red box is because that's actually a query within a query. And I will show you on the next slide how that comes about. So when you create the query of the severe TBI, this was diagnosed of traumatic brain injury, and it has all the AIS codes pre-dots listed in here. And then that way I don't have to add them again in this particular report, that no matter what report I build, I can use this whenever I want to. And like I did, I put it within the query. And this was already pre-built. So then I tried, like I said, I try to name the report and query pretty much the same so I can run them frequently. And so when you set it up, it would be the report name of severe TBI, and the query again would also be considered severe TBI. And then I run this, and I can run this, you can do it weekly, monthly, however. I did take out the trauma number, medical record number, last names, and the surgeon. So those were any identifiers on there. But then this generates my report, and then I can look at these people individually or close up, list where they went from their ED disposition, what their final outcome was, And then I also take into account alcohol or drugs that may have contributed to their influence their diagnoses. And that just populates into a spreadsheet that you can keep going. And I have a running severe TBI list that I keep as in my quality folder that I run year round. So now from that exact same report, if I wanted to identify those severe TBI patients that had the procedure of ICP, because that's also monitored through our TQIP as the ICPs, we have a query that I built that's called procedure ICP, and it lists all the codes right there. And so it did start from the ICD-9s, and then I just added ICD-10s when it became about for there. So when you run the report on the next slide, it'll show you that I just simply, again, if you the screen that's in the back, I use the same report, severe TBI, with the query of severe TBI, but now I've added at the bottom in our report, you can put in the date range, and then you can also add a secondary query. And so there I just clicked on query, and that's where I added the procedure ICP. So it's going to take that same group of patients that I had, but it's now going to pull out only those that had an ICP. So you can narrow it down that way. One of the things I also do in DI that is like frequently used is I just have a basic generic report that just identifies a group of patients for me by query. So I just simply put in the trauma number, the arrival date, discharge date, medical record number, and the patient name. And then no matter what query I run, I get that group of patients, and I don't have to keep creating multiple patients or multiple reports for various patients. This is one of my favorite reports. It's just a quick one just to identify a group of patients. And then on the next slide, I'll show you how some of the queries are that we build into it. So for instance, one of the other TQIP cohorts is femur shaft fractures. And this was already pre-built into our registry, and it simply gives the diagnosis of femur shaft fractures. So I can run my generic report and this particular cohort, and it'll give me the list of all my femur shaft fractures, which is one of our TQIP cohorts. Another one that's pre-built into the registry is the open tibia fractures. And again, you can use the same generic report and then just put in the this particular query, and now I have a list of my open tibia fractures. So it is pretty user-friendly as far as being able to build multiple reports from various queries. And I think that's all I have, didn't I, Carly?
Yep, I think that was the end. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I know it was pretty fast, but it just kind of shows you that you can build multiple reports and run them pretty easily without having to, and then from there you have a working list that you can have that you'll know which ones are going to keep it.
Can I, Marianne, this is Joyce. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Because I've never used that product, the DI product, but do you feel pretty confident with the pre-built, cohorts that it comes with, like you said, femur shaft, that you're getting exactly what TQIP is asking for? I just never have done it that way, and I just wondered, if you feel pretty confident that you're getting the right data.
Well, most of the time I will tell you yes, but I have found on several of them, because I do check them, like you said, Joyce, just to validate it, that I will actually go through and compare it to the AIS book to make sure that what's in there should be in there. And then I will also make sure, because I have found that sometimes they've put codes in that were extras, sometimes they put codes in that, they were missing a couple of codes. So yeah, I do validate. If, just like you, I take that as my basic. If I find out that it's not inclusive for everything, then I will give it a name and call it like ME for my name, Marianne Edwards. And then I will put femur shaft fracture, so I know that it's mine that I've tweaked.
Okay. That was my next question. I was going to say, if you find a discrepancy, can you modify it? That's great.
Yeah, so I'll just do a save as, and then I'll just change it to me. But it's like a good, like you said, you use it as a good starting point, and then from there you can tweak it to however you want it.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Because I know, for example, on the hemorrhagic shock, they have one for shock, but it wasn't specific for hemorrhagic shock. So I went ahead and took it and then modified it so that we could include the cohort definitions following the hemorrhagic shock cohort.
That was really great, Marianne. Thank you. I think it's nice both databases just to know what's in your database to be able to start with, and then you can kind of tailor it as much as you want based off institution and TQIP.
Yeah, and I think like Joyce said, you know, for us to start at the very beginning would be quite involved. So it's nice to have those basics from either program, whether it's trauma-based, which I've worked with in the past, or with digital innovations that I'm working with now, because either one allows us to then modify it to make it specifically for what we're looking for. And for that, I'm grateful, so I don't have to start from scratch.
Absolutely. I know our last surveyor was really, really heavy on using the database for all of its potential and really making sure we're letting our databases work for us instead of vice versa. So I think this is great.
Well, I agree too, Carly, because that was one of the things they talked about at our 2017 review was, you know, the monitoring of our severe TBIs, and are we paying more attention to, you know, the influence of alcohol or drugs on the, you know, severity of the injury, and also, you know, the documentation of ICPs. So for that, that was specifically why I went and built that, was that I could monitor it on a monthly basis or weekly, however it is we have with our patients. But it was very helpful.
Are there any other questions, feedback, comments? Okay, well, if nobody has anything else to add, I want to thank our two presenters. That was really wonderful. Make sure you guys, we'll send out the PowerPoint and the YouTube link, and we'll also get this posted to our website. Please use this, work with your registry. This is a lot of knowledge in a couple, you know, less than an hour. So make sure you review it later. I think this could be beneficial for everybody, especially combining this with our drill down stuff. Our next session for May, we're looking to do a trauma narrator discussion and a little presentation. So if this is something that's you're interested in as a facility to get started, this is Epic's Trauma Narrator, or you already are doing it. I know we've had a lot of good feedback and people willing to help with this. So please email me if you are still interested, or if there's certain things you want to know when we discuss this, please let me know. That's going to be our May session. And then once the standard book's out, we'll start doing chapter review of that. So thank you, everyone. And I really appreciate your time, and enjoy the sunshine a little bit in your weekends.
Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye. Thank you. Goodbye.
Great job.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Carly.